The sound of a spoon hitting the side of a ceramic mug is a small thing. Click, click, click. I've heard that sound every morning at 7:15 a.m. for exactly 32 years. My husband Arthur likes 2 sugars and a splash of cream. He stirs it clockwise 3 times, then taps the spoon twice on the rim. It's a rhythm. It's the heartbeat of our house. I sit across from him in my floral robe, the one he bought me for my 65th birthday, and I butter my toast. I am Martha Chen. I am a retired librarian. I am a woman who likes peonies, hates cold tea, and remembers every neighbor's birthday. That is the woman Arthur married. That is the woman who raised our daughter. The only problem is, that woman doesn't exist. I'm 79 years old now. My hands have these brown spots on them that I call wisdom marks, and my knuckles are starting to swell with the damp weather. I look like any other grandmother you'd pass in the grocery store. I look safe. I look settled. But every time Arthur looks at me and says, "Martha, dear, could you pass the jam?" a cold shiver runs down my spine. Because Martha isn't my name. It never was. For 30 decades, I have lived in a house built on a foundation of smoke. I've slept in a bed with a man who knows the shape of my body, the sound of my snore, and the way I take my coffee, but he doesn't know the first thing about the girl I was before I walked into that diner in San Francisco in 1994 and decided to become someone else. Being a librarian was the perfect cover. I've always been good at filing things away. I know how to put a book in its place so it never gets found by the wrong person. I applied that same logic to my life. I filed away the girl from the shipping docks. I filed away the blood. I filed away the name my mother whispered to me when I was a child. Mei-Ling, she used to say, "Keep your head down. Don't let them see you." I took that advice a little too literally. Arthur is a good man. That's the hardest part of all this. If he were a monster, it would be easy. If he were cruel, the lie wouldn't feel like a lead weight in my chest every time he kisses my forehead. He's a retired history teacher. He loves facts. He loves dates. He loves the unvarnished truth of the world. Sometimes, while he's watching the evening news, he'll reach over and take my hand. His skin feels like parchment, thin and dry. He'll squeeze my fingers and say, "We've had a good run, haven't we, Marty?" And I smile. I squeeze back. "The best, Arthur." Inside, I'm screaming. Inside, I'm thinking about the shoebox taped to the underside of the floorboards in the garden shed. The shoebox that holds a passport that expired in 1992. The shoebox that holds a photograph of a man with a scar across his bridge of the nose. A man that isn't Arthur. I think people assume that when you reach 79, your secrets just fade away. They think your memory goes, or the stakes get lower because the finish line is in sight. But it's the opposite. The closer I get to the end, the heavier the secret gets. It's like I'm carrying a suitcase that gets 5 pounds heavier every year. I'm tired, and my arms are starting to shake. I remember the first time I almost told him. We were 5 years into the marriage. Our daughter, Lily, was just a toddler. She had a fever, one of those scary middle-of-the-night spikes that makes your heart stop. We're in the emergency room, the air smelling of industrial floor cleaner and stale coffee. The nurse asked for family medical history. "Any history of heart disease on your side, Martha?" she asked. I froze. My mouth went dry. I didn't know. I didn't know because the people I came from didn't have medical histories. They had disappearances. They had tragedies. They had names that were erased from records. Arthur looked at me, his eyes full of concern. "Honey, are you okay? Your mother's side, it was the heart, right?" He was feeding me the lie I'd told him when we met. I'd told him my parents died in a car accident in Seattle. I'd told him I was an only child. "Yes," I whispered, the word feeling like ash in my mouth. Technically, it wasn't a lie. My mother's heart did fail, but it failed because of a bullet, not because of cholesterol. I looked at my daughter in that hospital crib, so small, so fragile, and I realized that if I told the truth, the world I had built for her would vanish. The social security numbers, the bank accounts, the Martha Chen that graduated from a college that I'd only ever visited as a tourist, it would all burn. So I kept the mask on. I adjusted the straps. I made it tighter. But here is the thing about masks. If you wear one long enough, the skin underneath starts to rot. Lately, it's the small things that are tripping me up. Being 79 means you lose your grip on the present, and the past starts to bleed through the cracks. Last week, Arthur and I were at the park. A group of kids was playing near the pond, shouting in a language I haven't spoken in 30 years. Without thinking, without even realizing I was doing it, I called out to them in a tongue that Martha Chen doesn't know. The kids stopped and stared. Arthur turned to me, his brow furrowed. He looked at me the way he looks at a historical document that doesn't quite make sense. "Martha?" he asked. "What was that? What did you just say?" My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I could feel the heat rising in my neck. I looked at the ducks. I looked at the grass. I looked anywhere but at his eyes. "Oh," I laughed, and the sound was brittle. Just something I picked up at the library years ago. A bit of Cantonese from a regular patron. You know how things stick in your head. He didn't look convinced. He stayed quiet the rest of the walk. He kept glancing at me sideways, as if he were trying to find a seam in my face where the mask might be peeling. I realized then that I am running out of time. The secret isn't just about a name anymore. It's about the fact that every "I love you" I've ever said was filtered through a filter. It's about the fact that my husband is in love with a ghost, a projection, a character I created because I was afraid of the dark. I'm 79 years old, and I'm tired of being Martha, but I'm terrified of being Mei-Ling. If I tell him now, does it undo the last 30 years? If a man spends half his life with a woman that doesn't exist, was he ever really married at all? Yesterday, I went to the garden shed. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and fertilizer. I knelt down, which is a project in itself at my age, and I reached under the floorboards. My fingers brushed the cold plastic of the shoebox. I pulled it out. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely get the tape off. Inside, there it was, the old passport, the face of a girl with dark, defiant eyes, a girl who was running for her life, a girl who thought she could just start over. I stared at the name printed there. It looked like a foreign language. Then I heard the gravel crunch outside. "Martha?" It was Arthur. He was standing in the doorway of the shed, the sun behind him so I couldn't see his face. He was holding a tray with 2 mugs of tea. "What are you doing down on the floor, honey? You'll ruin your knees." I shoved the box behind a bag of potting soil, my heart stopping. I turned around, forced a smile, and tried to stand up. "Just looking for the trowel, dear," I said. But he didn't move. He didn't offer me his hand. He just stood there, silhouetted in the light, looking at the spot where I'd hidden the box. "You've been spending a lot of time in here lately," he said. His voice wasn't his usual cheerful tone. It was heavy. It was the voice of a history teacher who had finally found the missing piece of a puzzle. "Arthur, I found the letter, Martha." The world went gray. The smell of the fertilizer became overwhelming. I felt a cold drop of sweat slide down my spine. "What letter?" I whispered, though I knew. "The one from the lawyer in San Francisco," he said. He stepped into the shed. He wasn't holding tea. He was holding a crumpled envelope. "It's been in the mail pile for 3 days. I thought it was a mistake until I saw the photograph inside." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small piece of paper. He held it out to me. It was a copy of my real birth certificate. "Who are you?" he asked, and for the first time in 30 years, I didn't have an answer prepared. The silence in that shed was louder than any scream. It was the kind of silence that has a weight to it. It pressed against my eardrums. It made the air feel thick, like I was trying to breathe through a wet towel. I looked at Arthur's shoes, brown leather loafers scuffed at the toe because he refuses to use a shoehorn. I'd polished those shoes 1,000 times. I knew every crease in the leather. How can you know a man's shoes so well, but have him be a complete stranger to your soul? "Arthur," I started. My voice sounded like someone was stepping on dry leaves. "I can explain." "Explain," he laughed, a short, sharp laugh. It wasn't a happy sound. It sounded like something breaking. "Explain that my wife of 30 years doesn't have a birth certificate in this country? Explain that the Martha I married is a ghost. I looked at the photo in that envelope, Martha, or Mei-Ling, or whoever you are. It's a photo of you. Younger, yes, but it's you, and it was sent by a firm specializing in unclaimed estate settlements for a family that supposedly died in a car crash in 1990. He stepped closer. The tray of tea he was holding, I realized now his hands were shaking so hard the porcelain was rattling against the wood. The car crash was a lie, wasn't it? I looked at the bag of potting soil behind me. My secret was sitting right there, 2 inches away. The mask wasn't just peeling anymore. It had fallen off the floor and shattered on the floor. "I had to," I whispered. I felt a sudden, sharp pain in my chest. Not a heart attack, but the physical sensation of a heart that had been held in a tight fist for 30 years, finally being let go. I sat down on a stack of plastic crates. My knees just wouldn't hold me anymore. I told him then. I told him about the shipping docks in San Francisco. I told him about the man I was married to before, a man who wasn't a history teacher, a man who dealt in things that came in crates in the middle of the night. I told him about the night the accident really happened. It wasn't a car crash, it was a warehouse fire. I was supposed to be inside. When I crawled out of the smoke, covered in soot and someone else's blood, I realized the world thought Mei-Ling was dead. In that moment, standing on a dark pier with the smell of salt and burning rubber in my nose, I had a choice. I could go back to a life of fear, or I could die and be reborn as someone safe. So I walked. I walked until I found a bus station. I found a purse that had been left on a bench, a purse that belonged to a woman named Martha, who had no family, no ties, and a social security card tucked into a side pocket. I stole a life. I stole a name. And then I spent 30 years trying to earn it by being the most perfect, boring, invisible woman in the world. Arthur listened. He didn't interrupt. He just stood there, his face getting paler and paler. The sun was setting now, casting long orange shadows across the dirt floor of the shed. He looked old. For the first time, I realized that he was 81, and I had just taken the last 30 years of his life and turned them into a fiction. "All those stories," he said softly, "the stories about your grandmother's house in Seattle, the stories about your childhood dog, the stories you told Lily when she was a little girl, they were all just research?" "I had to make it real, Arthur. If I didn't believe it, how could you?" "I loved you," he said. His voice was a ghost of itself. "I loved Martha. But Martha is a character in a book you wrote. Who are you? Who is the woman sitting in front of me right now?" I reached out to touch his hand, but he pulled away. That hurt more than the fear. That was the cardiac event, the rejection, the realization that by protecting myself, I had utterly destroyed the one person who actually cared if I lived or died. He turned and walked out of the shed without another word. I stayed there in the dark for hours. The temperature dropped. My joints started to ache with that deep, dull throb that only comes with being nearly 80. I smelled the damp wood and the old metal of the garden tools. I felt like one of those tools, left out in the rain, forgotten, rusting away. I thought about Lily, our daughter. She's a lawyer now. She prides herself on justice, on the truth. How do I tell her that her entire heritage is a fabrication, that her so-called Asian American identity is rooted in a woman who was a fugitive, not a librarian from Seattle? I felt a wave of nausea. I leaned over and vomited into the dirt. It was just bile and the tea I'd had that morning. Is this what it's for? I kept myself alive. I survived the docks. I survived the fire. I survived the decades of looking behind my shoulder every time a police car drove past. I built a beautiful, quiet, safe life. But as I sat there in the dark, shivering, I realized that a safe life built on a lie is just a high-end prison. I'd spent 30 years guarding a cell door, making sure no one got in, only to realize I was the only one inside. Eventually, I stood up and hobbled back to the house. The kitchen light was on. I could see Arthur through the window. He was sitting at the table. He hadn't touched his dinner. He was just staring at the empty chair across from him, my chair. I opened the back door. The click of the latch sounded like a gunshot. Arthur didn't look up. "I'm going to sleep in the guest room," he said. He didn't call me dear. He didn't call me Marty. He didn't call me anything. "Arthur, please. I'm still the same woman who held your hand when your father died. I'm the same woman who stayed up all night when you had the flu. The name on the paper doesn't change the heart in my chest." He finally looked at me. His eyes were red. "Doesn't it? Everything you did while wearing a mask. How do I know which parts were you and which parts were Martha? Did you love me, or did you just need a place to hide?" I didn't have an answer, because if I'm being honest, the kind of honest that burns, I didn't know anymore. In the beginning, it was definitely a hiding spot. He was stable, he was kind, he was the opposite of the world I came from. But somewhere between the 10th and the 20th year, the lines blurred. I forgot where the lie ended and I began. I went to the guest room. The sheets felt cold and smelled of lavender detergent, the kind Martha liked. I lay there in the dark, listening to the house creak. Every sound felt like an accusation. The house was settling, or maybe it was just groaning under the weight of the truth. I thought about the girl, Mei-Ling. I thought about her fire, her grit, her desperation to live. I had buried her so deep I thought she was dead, but she was still there, wasn't she? She was the one who had kept this secret. She was the one who was currently shivering under a floral quilt, wondering if she'd lose everything by sunrise. That was the longest night of my life. At 3 a.m. I got up. I couldn't breathe in that small room. I walked down the hallway, my bare feet silent on the hardwood. I stopped outside our bedroom door. I could hear Arthur's breathing. It was heavy, hitching every few seconds. He was crying in his sleep. I wanted to go in. I wanted to crawl into the bed and tell him I was sorry. I wanted to tell him that Mei-Ling would have loved him too if she'd ever been given the chance to meet him. But I stayed in the hallway. I was a ghost in my own home. I went back to the kitchen and sat in the dark. I watched the clock on the wall. 4 a.m., 5 a.m., 6 a.m. The sun started to peek through the blinds. The golden hour. It's supposed to be beautiful, but it just felt exposing. Then I heard it. The floorboards creaking in the hallway. Arthur was up. I held my breath. Would he come into the kitchen? Would he pack a bag? Would he call Lily and tell her that their mother was a fraud? I heard the sound of the kettle. He was making tea. He walked into the kitchen. He looked a decade older than he had yesterday. He didn't look at me. He went to the cupboard, took out his mug, the one with the chipped handle, and reached for the sugar. Click, click, click. The sound of the spoon. The heartbeat of the house. He finished stirring. He took a sip. Then he set the mug down on the counter and finally turned to face me. "I didn't sleep," he said. "Me neither," I replied. "I've been thinking about the fire, the one you escaped." He paused, his lip trembling just a little. "You must have been so scared, to leave everything behind, to have no one to turn to." I felt a lump form in my throat. I couldn't speak. I just nodded. "I'm angry, Martha. I'm angry. I feel like I could break something. I feel like I've been living in a house with a locked door for 30 years. He took a shaky breath. But then I thought, if you hadn't become Martha, you wouldn't be here. And if you weren't here, I would have been alone all these years. He walked over to the table and sat down. Not in his chair, in my chair. "Tell me about her," he said. "Who?" I whispered. "Mei-Ling. Don't tell me about the librarian. Don't tell me about the peonies. Tell me about the girl on the docks. Tell me the truth for once in your life. Because if we're going to spend whatever time we have left together, I want to know who is actually sitting across from me." It was the breaking point, the moment where the old life died for good. I took a deep breath. It felt like my lungs were finally expanding all the way for the first time since 1994. Her name was Mei-Ling, and she was a smoker. She hated the smell of lavender, and she was the bravest person I ever knew. I began. "So," I said, "that's the truth." 30 years, Mei-Ling, he replied. Hearing my real name spoken with love felt like a blow and a blessing at once. "I can't tell you it's okay," he said. "I'm mourning Martha, the woman I thought I knew." He paused. "But the care you gave me wasn't a lie. The way you looked at Lily when she was born, that was real." "That was the only real thing I had," I whispered. We didn't fix it that day. Some days he sees resentment. Other days he calls me May, just to hear it. We told Lily. There were months of silence. Slowly she's coming back, learning her history is more complicated than a filing system. I'm 79 now, finally living my own life. It's smaller and scarier, but it's mine. I'm telling you this because others are hiding too. Maybe not a stolen identity, but a debt, a mistake, or a love that isn't real. You think silence is kindness. You think playing the part will make the truth die. It won't. Secrets don't die. They grow roots and squeeze until you forget how to breathe. My advice: burn the house down. Don't wait until your time is running out to be seen. The safety you think silence buys is counterfeit. It's worth nothing when the bill comes due. The truth is a fire. It burns, but once the smoke clears, you can finally build something that won't blow away. I sat across from my husband for 30 years, and he never knew my name. Don't let that be your story. Wake up. Tell the truth. Be brave enough to be known. Because being loved for a lie is just another way of being alone.